2025 marks 75 years since the Boston Celtics drafted the first Black player into the NBA. His name was Chuck Cooper, and his son, Chuck Cooper III, is continuing his legacy. Chuck, 75 years. I imagine you celebrate this milestone year after year, but why is this year special?
Well, this year is very special because the NBA has decided to honor the pioneers for the 75th pairs with a league-wide celebration. And boy, did they kick it off in grand fashion with the TV broadcast mentions and videos and the social media blast that went out. And, the NBA produced a video that featured Jalen Brown talking about my father. Can't thank Jalen enough. And then the Celtics put together a piece that featured JT, Jason Tatum, D. White, and Drew Holiday. And to see today's players talk about my father and have appreciation for his sacrifice and his contribution to, in my humble opinion, the greatest game in the world is very, very special. So it's just a incredible start to the 75th anniversary celebration.
Mhm. And tell me the story for anyone who may not know briefly. What's the story of how your father got drafted by the Celtics?
Well, my father, first of all, my father, a lot of people don't know, he actually went to HBCU school, West Virginia State College at the time, and got drafted after just a half a semester.
Wow.
The NCAA didn't even count black colleges records. So after he honorably served in the Navy, he came back and went to Duquesne University, and that's where the magic really happened. He became the second consensus Black All American in college basketball history. So he was playing some ball at Duquesne. And the first was Don Barstow, by the way, became his teammate with the Celtics in 1953. But my father was a great college player. But when he came out of Duquesne, he didn't expect to be drafted by the NBA because no one had, right? And so he immediately signed with the Harlem Globetrotters. Back then, if you were a black ball player and you wanted to make decent money playing professional basketball, you had to be one of the 10 best players in the world because the Globetrotters only had 10 spots. They only traveled with 10 players. But anyway, there was a smoke-filled room in Chicago, 1950, in the Chicago hotel. Red Auerbach and owner Walter Brown were in the meeting, and it was Boston's 13th overall pick in the second round of the draft. And Walter Brown stood up and said, "Boston takes Chuck Cooper, the All-American out of Duquesne University." There was another owner that said, "You can't take him; he's colored." I'm sure it was a different word back then. But anyway, Walter Brown fired back immediately. "I don't give a damn if he's striped, polka dot, or plaid. Boston takes Chuck Cooper." And that was the first official act to integrate the NBA. So we can't thank the 18-time world champion Boston Celtics enough.
Absolutely. And Chuck, you've mentioned to my GBH colleague Esteban Bustillos, who did a story about your father and Bob Cousy's relationship and how it fit into all of this. And you mentioned to Esteban that your father and other black players at that time were bought in for a very specific role, and it strikes me because you talked about how even the stats that they were putting up at black colleges, for instance, were not recognized. So then they get into the NBA,
Right.
they're limited in what they can do. And how does that affect the impact that they're able to have as far as being some of the greatest players of all time?
That's a great question. So, they were expected to do the dirty work, rebound, play defense, and then sometimes, on occasion, protect, the white stars of the team. But, it impacted their ability to put up big numbers as far as scoring. The NBA, you're not going to integrate and have a black star. That's not going to happen. It wouldn't happen in corporate America today. It just doesn't happen. But what the pioneers did do, they were great at what they were able to do. I mean, my father came in and immediately established himself as the Celtics' best rebounder, their best defender. He would watch anywhere from a guard to the center, and excelled at that. He was actually in contention for Rookie of the Year. The honor eventually went to his good friend and teammate Bob Cousy, but he was the first African American named to an all rookie team. So he came in and established himself, and with Bob Cousy and Red Auerbach and the great team that they had at that time, it led to the Celtics' first winning record. So it was the Celtics' first winning season. So he came in and he was able to contribute in the ways that he was able to do it and when was allowed to contribute and help the Celtics establish a winning culture. And of course, they never looked back after that. They never lost. They never had another losing season before Bill Russell came in and they ran off 8 straight world championships. So, they found a way to contribute and they did it at a high level.
And even legends like Bill Russell recognize this, right? Because he held out on accepting his Hall of Fame ring until your father was recognized. Didn't want it, 40 years that he said, I'm not accepting this until people like Chuck Cooper get the recognition that they deserve. What did that mean to you?
Well, it would mean a lot if anyone did that, but to have a human rights, civil rights pioneer and legends such as Bill Russell, the winningest player in NBA history, be the one to take that stand and wait 40 something years, and he put it out on Twitter like, "Hey, I'm accepting my ring now. Chuck Cooper's in." So,
Mhm.
that just meant the world to us, and
That
I've
was
been
in
around.
2019.
Say, I'm sorry.
In
In
2019.
2019 when my father, was enshrined into the Hall of Fame with so many great, players that stood with me on stage, but, I've been around Bill Russell, and I know Bill Russell's daughter, Karen, and I had never heard that story. Bill never mentioned, so when I saw that tweet, it just really blew me away, and, I'm forever grateful for the late, great Mr. William Felton Russell and all those great NBA players who stood on stage with us on October 19th, in October 2019.
75 years later, do you think your father is as recognized as he should be, or is there still more to tell about his story?
There's still a whole lot more to tell about my father, and I gotta mention his other 2, trailblazing partners, Earl Lloyd and Nat Sweetwater Clifton. When you think about Chuck Cooper, Nat Clifton, and Earl Lloyd, often all you heard is, "Well, he was the first to get drafted, he was the first to play, he was the first to his contract to be purchased by an owner contract." But these guys, all 3 were tremendous ball players, and either one of them or all 3 of them could have been the stars on their team if they were afforded that opportunity. But it was 1950. We were in a pre-Emmett Till America, and that just wasn't the case. But I can tell you this: my father really enjoyed his time with the Boston Celtics because he went on and played a year or two with the Hawks and the Pistons, and the experience just wasn't the same. He really respected Coach Red Auerbach and Walter Brown for the way that he was treated by the Celtics organization. Just a special, special organization to be proud of. And I always tell people, listen, if we had a chance to pick an organization, a sports franchise in any sport, we could not pick a better historic partner than the 18-time world champion Boston Celtics.
And it's amazing that you're saying that, Chuck, because so often the conversation that is tied to this is right the fact that Boston is not necessarily doesn't have the perception to the rest of the U.S. as being very welcoming to Black people, but the Celtics have all of this history, starting with your dad, that elevates and that celebrates Black basketball stars. So, how do you want people to expand their perspective of that?
Well, for the Celtics organization, I tell people all the time, and I think I've converted a lot of fans out here when I tell them that they drafted my father. They started the first Black starting five. 14 years later, 1964, and then Bill Russell became the first Black head coach. So, and then even today, what they're doing with Celtics United for social justice is just amazing. The money that they're pouring into the Black community. So, if there's a franchise that if you're looking for a team, don't look any
Nothing will
further
take
than now. Come on. Go Boston, Boston Celtics all the way, all the way.
you. Hmm.
And again, and the Celtics too, I run the Chuck Cooper Foundation. We've been able to award 405,000 in scholarships and educational support, and the Celtics have been partnering with me in that organization. So I mean, it's just a phenomenal. Again, we couldn't pick a better partner than the Celtics.
That's beautiful, Chuck. And I know you still come to Boston for the
Much
games.
as I can, I
And
try to come back as often as I can for
what's
sure.
it like walking into the garden carrying your father's legacy on your back?
It's phenomenal, but I tell you what, the biggest moment, I was at game 5 and I got a chance to touch and feel that confetti.
Okay,
It was
now
oh,
take us
yeah,
there.
it was phenomenal, but, I get so much respect and appreciation, not just from the, current Celtic players, but the fans that I interact with, when they hear the name Chuck Cooper, it's hard for me to pick up a tab if I'm out at the restaurant, they really appreciate,
So
what
I know who I'm going to dinner with next
I
time.
got you, Chris. I definitely got you for sure, for sure.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I know that not just the Celtics, but Boston is really thankful for your father's contribution, even if he didn't necessarily know the impact that he would have all of these years later. Um, and and I mean, of course, you know, your legacy is part of his. You're carrying it on, and so how do you want people to remember you as you remember your father?
Well, I just want people to realize that, I pretty much worked all of my adult life giving back. And I live in Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh community. And I always did it to do two things: continue his legacy of helping under resourced people. But my other goal and mission was to make sure that my father's legacy was never forgotten. So if anybody wants to remember Chuck Cooper III, they can just remember me as a proud son who carried on his legacy of giving back and helping others.
Excellent. Chuck, before I let you go, I'm going to ask you a question that we ask everyone as
Uh-oh,
part of
uh-oh.
GBH News Rooted. Don't worry, it's not too hard. But it is, the question is, what is one thing that keeps you rooted?
It keeps me rooted. Probably two things: my father's legacy, everything that he did to accomplish what he did. When he left Boston and left the NBA, he went and got his master's degree for the University of Minnesota because he was told he couldn't lead without a master's degree. So he did that. He came back to Pittsburgh and became the first Black city department director in the city of Pittsburgh's history. And then PNC Bank, their predecessor, Pittsburgh National Bank, he was their first Black executive. And one of the things that one of the bank executives said about my father was, he did all these things to open doors, but it was never about him. So I would have to say just that, to continue to do things, but to be rooted for all the right reasons, and to make sure that it's just not about you.
Right. Legacy on and off the court. Chuck Cooper the third. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paris. I always appreciate it.